The Congressional Black Caucus is largely sticking by President Biden in this moment. As of now, not a single member of the caucus has called on the president to step aside, which is good. But NBC News reports that some members want to see a change in the campaign strategy. This as Vice President Harris defends the president in campaign stops across the country, including one this week in North Carolina.
One thing we know about our president, Joe Biden, is that he is a fighter. He is a fighter. And he is the first to say, when you get knocked down, you get back up.
Joining us now is Democratic Congresswoman Joyce Beatty of Ohio. Welcome, Congresswoman. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Michael.
Congresswoman Beatty, I would just like to know, before the debate, I know you were supporting the president. Post-debate, you were supporting the president. I mean, nowadays we got to ask, because members of Congress coming out with statements left and right. Are you supporting the president today?
Let me be very clear. I am supporting the president today. And you can count on that.
I think one of the things that has been interesting for folks is trying to understand why certain caucuses and coalitions have held and others have not. And I believe that you wrote an op-ed, not about this, but in many ways parallel to this, that I think gives part of the answer. This from MSNBC, quote, "We do not have the privilege of apathy. The fight for freedom has always been and is once again at our doorstep, and we cannot afford apathy when oppression knocks on our door." What is it that members of the CBC see and understand that other members may not?
Well, I think we see what I think America sees and what the grassroots folks see, the voters see. When you think about 14 million people cast their vote for Joe Biden, and in that article, I'm specifically talking about Black members. I'm talking about Black Americans, because this is a president that made a commitment to all of America, but especially Black America. He said that he'd put a Black woman on the Supreme Court. And he did that. He said he would pick a female to be his running mate. Not only did he pick a female, he picked a Black American. He also said he would support those who were trying to better themselves, whether it was in health care, whether it was in education. $16 billion, the most money ever put into HBCUs. We can't afford to have a Donald Trump. And that's what I think people are missing. This is about what we're running against. We're running against someone that's a dictator, someone who said on day one he would get retribution, revenge, someone that has been indicted on 34 counts and said he could come right here on Fifth Avenue and shoot someone and no one would be able to do anything about it. He's been anti-people of color, anti-women. He has done some of the most deplorable things. And we're up here debating whether Joe Biden could be our candidate. Joe Biden on his worst day is better than Donald Trump would ever be on his best day. And I don't think he's had a best day. He doesn't answer questions. He avoids things. And so that's what I'm talking about. It will set us back. We have members of Congress who are saying we were better during the era of Jim Crow. We have mega Republicans saying that we should go back to the 1960s. I know my history. If we go back to the 1960s, Michael, you know, for people who look like you and I, we couldn't vote. We're talking about civil rights, voting rights, workers' rights. And so that's the statement that I want America to know, that I stand with Joe Biden because he understands hardships. He understands jumping over hurdles. He understands people, and the people have spoken. You know this. We are the caucus. We are the party of democracy. We believe in that sacred being able to vote. That is something that is very sacred to us. People stood in line for 5 and 6 hours when they were going to have the chance to vote for a Black man to be president of the United States. We know Joe Biden will be able to overcome hurdles. We know that Joe Biden has told us he's running. He's not going anywhere.
Congressman, you have the caucus pretty much locked in on Joe Biden, and they're linked arms around him. But as I noted in coming into the conversation, there are some who are saying they'd like to see the campaign change, some of its strategy. What are you hearing that change of strategy should be? And have what we've seen from the president since 2 weekends ago, the weekend after this very difficult debate. Has that been that sort of change in strategy where the president's been more out there, he's been more engaged, he's more in the community? What are you hearing that change should be, and is it happening?
I think, Michael, you're right. I think we've seen some changes. We've heard the president clarify things, clarify that he's going to spend more time looking at his schedule and being more protective of it. Not that he's not going to do meetings after 8 o'clock. He did an amazing job just yesterday in Michigan, where you saw him talk about his deliverables, talk about what he's done, what he did in the first 100 days, talking about the job that has to be completed. Joe Biden has come into his own. While he didn't admonish his staff, he said sometimes they give him a little too much. So what we saw yesterday, what we saw at NATO, was Joe Biden. Joe Biden being himself, not being scripted, not worrying about Donald Trump, but delivering for the American people. We are very quick to talk about polls when they had him down. But now let's talk about some of those same polls that now have him matched or even above.
But more importantly, showing that the base of the Democratic Party is consolidating around him while the elites are still clutching their pearls and telling him to get out of the race.
And Democrats or people who are working with Democrats saying they're going to hold back, whether it is their monetary support and coming out against him without a plan makes no sense. It also says to me they don't know the process of the DNC. They don't know the process in the days ahead of us that we're confronted with. We have rules and we have delegates. And last time I checked, Joe Biden had 3,000, almost 900 delegates. And I think that speaks volumes for the people who believe in our democracy, the people who fight for our democracies. I can tell you that the Congressional Black Caucus, under the leadership of Stephen Horsford, consulting and working with my good friend Jim Clyburn, we have not been stronger for the American people. You can talk about just about any area that the American people ask you about. Let's talk about crime and gun safety. We have put forth more legislation and passed than we've done in the history of Congress. Healthcare for our young folks, healthcare for our seniors. Just take insulin alone. There were people paying $400, $600, and close to $800 a month. And now to have that at $35 a month? I mean, it speaks volumes for the fight that Joe Biden understands. Donald Trump doesn't understand this. He's equating picking a running mate this week or next week to The Apprentice, a fake show on TV. Come on, this should not be, we should not be spending our time talking against Joe Biden, but saying to the American people how bad this will be if a Donald Trump prevails.
She's bringing the fight this morning.
I'm bringing the fight.
Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn. MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.